started. Anyway, good morning, and just for informational purposes, President Mellow is stuck in the metro or someplace in traffic, something that we're all familiar with around here. So as soon as she gets in, she'll be joining the panel, and we're trying to get her here as quickly and as easily as possible. And I'm going to have my prepared statement here for a second, but I just want to open as I visited with you privately beforehand, and I want to tell you how pleased I am that we have each and every one of you here. I was so thrilled reading your testimony last night. I appreciate collectively your efforts to make sure that folks that often don't have opportunities or that slip through cracks find ways to move forward, and to this focus on helping particularly first-generation college kids succeed, and not always kids, as Dr. Fischer will tell us a little bit later. But I am just extraordinarily pleased with your work, and again, this is a committee where we sometimes have some spirited differences. This is actually one of the topics that tends to bring us together across partisan lines. So again, I'm really thrilled you're here. So, again, my pleasure to welcome our witnesses today to the Subcommittee on Labor, Health and Human Services and Education to discuss closing the achievement gap in higher education. Looking forward to hearing your testimonies. Our country's system of higher education is unparalleled in the world. Our institutions of higher education have produced advancements in science, technology, and the humanities, and have been critical in making the United States economically competitive. Our higher education system has also made a difference in the lives of millions of Americans by helping individuals from disadvantaged backgrounds to improve their economic prospects and enter the middle class. And they've educated tens of thousands from around the globe while setting a global standard in access and excellence that's the envy and inspiration of much of the world. Despite its many successes, our higher education system faces challenges. Minorities and children from low-income families are less likely to attend college compared to their wealthier counterparts. Additionally, entering college does not guarantee success. Students from these same groups are also less likely to persist in higher education and eventually obtain a degree. While the cost of higher education is certainly a factor, it's not the only factor. Often these students lack a network of family and friends who've attended college and are familiar with the ins and outs of applying for aid, choosing classes, and preparing for a career after graduation. There's a role for the federal government to play in helping disadvantaged students to be successful in higher education. A more educated populace strengthens our workforce and our international competitiveness. Individuals who complete their course of study and obtain a degree are more likely to be employed and earn more than their counterparts who were not able to do so. The Department of Education's loan and grant programs make higher education a possibility for millions of Americans, and programs such as TRIO and Gear Up help students to make use of these financial resources. Through these programs, the federal government partners with states, school districts, institutions of higher education, nonprofits, private industry, and tribes to help develop students prepare for, enroll in, and complete a higher education. This preparation is essential for helping these students make use of the financial aid and educational opportunities that are available to them. Today, we look forward to hearing from our witnesses about ways in which the efforts I've mentioned can improve college access and completion among first-generation college students. Today, I'm pleased to welcome, and she's not yet here, but will be, so I'm going to go ahead and mention her, Dr. Gail Mellow, the president of LaGuardia Community College in Long Island City, New York, who will testify about successful interventions that have been piloted at LaGuardia and elsewhere to help students succeed in completing their chosen degree programs. Dr. Brian Fitzgerald, CEO of the Business Higher Education Forum, who will testify about private sector partnerships to increase educational attainment for underrepresented populations, particularly in areas aligned with workforce needs. Dr. Ben Castleman, Assistant Professor of Education and Public Policy at the Curry School of Education at the University of Virginia, who will testify about his research on the impact of relatively low-cost interventions, providing information on financial aid, on keeping disadvantaged students in school. Dr. Aaron Thompson, Executive Vice President and Chief Academic Officer of the Kentucky Council on Post-Secondary Education and Professor in the Department of Educational Leadership and Policy Studies at Eastern Kentucky University, who will testify about efforts in the state of Kentucky to develop partnerships to improve higher education, and Dr. Carol Fischer, Post-Doctoral Fellow at Dow's Institute for Dental Research at the University of Iowa, an adjunct professor in biology at Kirkwood Community College in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, who will testify about her experience with the McNair program, a part of TRIO, which helped her overcome obstacles as a first-generation college student and obtain a Ph.D. I must add, she also is a former resident of the district that I'm privileged to represent, so it's very wonderful to have you here. And that's a program at East Central I'm very, very familiar with, and it's just done a great job for literally thousands of students over many decades now. So I look forward to hearing all of your testimony. I'd like to yield now to my ranking member for the day, at least for the outset of this hearing, the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Fattah, for any opening remarks he cares to make.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that this is a critically important hearing, and obviously as our country economically competes with billion-plus populated countries like China and India, the question about how we make sure more and more of our young people live up to their potential and have the opportunities to be productive, both entrepreneurs and part of our workforce in the country is critically important. For far too long, these discussions have centered around, the challenges that these young people and their families face. But I think more and more now we see that the country faces a significant challenge because, as the President said, we have fallen so far in the list of nations with adults with a college degree. And we see emerging economic powers like China, which are going to graduate 280 million people. We sit here in a country with just a little over 300 million people. And if we're going to remain the leading nation in the world, every one of these young people are going to have the opportunity to achieve. This discussion of an achievement gap is somewhat mislabeled because a lot of it is an opportunity gap, is that these young people don't get the opportunity in the K-12 circumstance to prepare themselves to adequately matriculate at a higher education level. So I'm concerned about the achievement gap from the terminal degree down. I think we have challenges at every particular sector in our country in which we need to be producing more and more college-educated adults. In our federal workforce for national security purposes, we do not now have the replacement persons that we need to go into critical infrastructures like maintaining our nuclear weapons stockpile. And so we have a lot of challenges. And so at the base of this, obviously, I've been very interested over the years from Gear Up, TRIO, Upward Bound, the Opportunity Tax Credit. I mean, we can go through the laundry list. But the country will have to come to grips with this, and I'm so pleased that the chairman's hosting this hearing. I spent some time a few years ago. I came out to Oklahoma City. I went over to Oklahoma University. They had at that time, they just opened up a new engineering school, and they had some Gear Up kids there. And you were looking down over this overhang balcony to see them doing the work, and you could see future Dean Kamens right there. And we need engineers to solve problems, and in order to produce them, we need people like those presented here. So, Chairman, I look forward to hearing the testimony.
Thank you very much, my friend. And I had not looked out in the audience, but look, I see some proud East Central and Oklahoma. So these are people from my district, so I'm going to exercise chairman's prerogative and ask you just to stand up and let us recognize you and express our appreciation for all you do. You got pretty proud of your alum here that are here. So thank you guys very much, and appreciate you being at the hearing. With that, we'll go to the testimony. Obviously, as I mentioned, when President Mellow gets here, we'll sort of insert her in the lineup. But if we can, Dr. Fitzgerald, we'll start with you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. As a first-generation college grad myself, I thank you for inviting me to speak with you this morning about the need to close the achievement gap at all levels in higher education and how the Business Higher Ed, or BHEF, projects are addressing this challenge. Now in its 38th year, BHEF is the nation's oldest membership organization of Fortune 500 CEOs, college and university presidents, and other leaders dedicated to advancing innovative higher education and workforce solutions and improving U.S. competitiveness and national security. Far too few students who enroll in post-secondary education persist to complete an industry-valued credential within a reasonable period of matriculation. The causes are well documented, but the result is unmistakable. Far too many first-generation, low-income, and underrepresented students leave post-secondary education with neither the credentials nor the skills to exceed in an increasingly competitive global economy. BHEF's signature initiative is designed to address this gap. Through the collaboration of its business and academic members, BHEF has launched the National Higher Ed and Workforce Initiative, a 6-year effort that includes regional projects focused on business higher education partnerships to improve degree completion. It also includes a national effort to disseminate learning from the projects and scale effective practices. These partnerships are scaled with other business partners, including the Aerospace Industries Association and the Business Roundtable. The regional projects demonstrate how to meet emerging workforce needs, increase undergraduate interest and persistence in key disciplines, and help students graduate from community colleges and universities workforce ready. BHEF has a history of developing groundbreaking simulation tools to demonstrate the impact of scaling evidence-based practices on college completion. BHEF's original P16 STEM education model provided insights into how degree completion represents a key leverage point in a national workforce and competitiveness strategy. BHEF and the U.S. Navy's Office of Naval Research collaborated to develop the U.S. STEM undergraduate education model to show how the Navy's investment in cutting-edge student retention strategies can have the strongest impact on its future workforce needs. Although the modeling focused on students enrolled in STEM majors, it provides a window on the broader completion challenge. The modeling demonstrates that strategies like providing summer bridge programs before matriculation and offering early research internships boost persistence and degree completion. However, the modeling showed that multi-dimensional programs, those that combine strategies and continue over time, have a far greater impact on degree completion. Examples include the Meyerhoff Scholars Program, the Lewis Stokes Alliances for Minority Participation, and the Freshman Research Initiative. Many first-generation students begin their post-secondary education at community colleges. However, less than 10% of all students who start community colleges in STEM majors earn a degree in STEM within 6 years. NSF has provided BHEF with a 5-year grant to launch the Undergraduate STEM Interventions with Industry Consortium, a group of BHEF member-led sites that will engage business and apply combinations of evidence-based interventions designed to increase student persistence and completion. Business engagement with first-generation and low-income students before they transfer to 4-year institutions is essential. When business plays an active role, it helps ensure that students will complete their post-secondary education and are provided with opportunities to pursue high-skill, high-wage jobs. The effectiveness of BHEF's initiative, however, is dependent on a healthy higher education system and adequate financial aid for its students. BHEF believes that maintaining the health of the Pell Grant program and the purchasing power of the Pell Grant Maximum Award, as well as other Title IV programs, are critical components of a national completion strategy. Federal student aid should remain a priority to ensure that all Americans, regardless of their economic status, have the opportunity to attend college, improve their knowledge and skills to excel in a 21st century economy. BHEF recommends funding the Pell Grant program and at least the 2015 level and increasing the Pell Maximum Award. Congress also should support the federal SEOG, Work Study, TRIO, and GEAR Up programs to serve more disadvantaged and low-income students. Each of these programs plays an important role in preparing first-generation, low-income, and underrepresented students for college, encouraging persistence and ultimately degree completion. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Appreciate that very much, Dr. Fitzgerald. President, welcome. We introduced you and explained you've, like all of us, encountered traffic problems in Washington, D.C. So if you're ready, we'll move to your testimony, if that's okay.
I am. Thank you so much, Chairman Cole. And I did have every form of possible delay, airplane delay, someone sick on the metro. It was a wonderful morning. So I'm just so delighted to be here. And I'm so honored to give you testimony today, and I'm sorry for not having heard my colleagues. I'm going to speak as a community college president, so there certainly are major national issues, but I wanted you to hear it from the street level, if you will, from what my life is like. So at LaGuardia, we have about 60,000 students. About 20,000 of those are they're going for a degree. About 40,000 of those are getting workforce development training with us. But like most community college students, beer blast is not a problem that I have at LaGuardia. These students are on majority female. Over half are over 25. They all commute. About 60% of them work. Of my females, about a quarter of them are mothers. 68% of these students, and this is true nationally, are working over 20 hours a week. And when you look at who community college students are, I think you see these are the individuals who want to make it in America. They believe in the American dream, and they're doing everything that they can to get there. When we look at the kinds of things that we want to do to help them, I think back, so I'm revealing my age. I graduated from high school in 1971. When I graduated, 28% of the jobs needed something beyond a high school diploma. Now it's 60%. And so at community colleges, we have to be relentlessly pragmatic in two ways. One is that there are really necessary technical and near-term skills that our students need because they're poor and they need to work. And so we want to make an investment in skills that will really allow them to immediately enter the workforce. And that's why our relationship with business is so important, and I'll speak to that in a minute. But we also want to make sure that we give students what I would call the general competencies, the longer-term skills, because those are like patient capital. Those will really pay not immediate rewards, but long-term rewards. And I think together what we all want is an economy and a society that is filled with people who are living the American dream. So I want to speak just a little bit about 4 ways I have found as a college president that really make a difference in the lives of students. Before I do that, and because I'm in front of a congressional panel, I couldn't help but do one line of reference to funding. And I will just point out that for community colleges in our country, we serve now over half of all undergraduates, and we get about 2/3 of all the public funding, so that the relationship between what we get and what others get for the hardest to serve students is a big gap. But the 4 areas that I wanted to speak to you about that are sort of on the ground, if you will. One is investing in helping faculty be better teachers. We do this all the time in K-12. No one pays any attention once that student walks across the graduation stage when they get out of high school. And so what we have found at LaGuardia is investing in helping these faculty teach better is essential. They're facing students unlike any we've ever seen before. And what we have found is that while most of the technology is focused on teaching students, we have to also use that technology to teach the teachers. They need better skills, and we've got to do that, because if we could get those faculty to help just 2 more students pass their class in every class, we would raise graduation rates by 7% without any additional dollars. And so we have to be smart about technology. LaGuardia is now working with community colleges in Arizona and in Florida to really use technology to help faculty get better. We've also found the same to be true when we look at getting students from a high school equivalency, adults who didn't make it out of high school, up to and through college, because the high school equivalency isn't enough. We did a random control trial study in our Bridges to Career and College program, and we found when we had full-time faculty, well-trained, we could make a huge difference, double the graduation, triple the number of students who went to college. But we also had something very important, and that's a segue to my second issue, which is that we contextualize that education for these adults who had not made it out of high school. It's wonderful to read Moby Dick. I love that. But if you're going to be a healthcare worker, it's also pretty important for you to read some medical records, to understand the kind of language that will be used within your occupation. And that's where the connection with business is so important. We need to know realistically what is needed in the workplace. And we have found, for example, in working with Weill Cornell, which is a major hospital conglomerate, if you will, in New York City, that they were hiring bachelor's degree students for their front office staff. They were bright, they were wonderful, and they stayed about 6 months because they wanted to do other things. When they worked with us, and we customized a 17-week program to train students who were in their first year of college or who had not yet entered college, to learn the skills that were really necessary, two things happened. One is that those individuals stayed longer, and the second is that they're now eligible for Weill Cornell's tuition reimbursement. So we're really taking people on a ladder step by step. But business had to put some skin in the game. It took them time to really identify what were the skills that were needed. So that relationship with business is essential. The third, and leading me to my third point, which is that applied learning is essential. Many of my students have never met one of us, never met a person who went to work in a suit. They never met a professional, much less worked in a professional area. So internships and applied learning is so important. But to do that is hard. It's hard for the businesses. It actually costs time to have volunteer help. And it gets harder. Our students are so poor at the community colleges that they can't give up their second or third part-time job in order to do a free internship. So I think as a country, we need to really think of a tripartite relationship where education and business and government come together and give students support for working in companies where they then can understand what it's like, what the job is really like. And the companies, frankly, get to see these students who they're not from Princeton, they're not from Yale, they're not from Harvard, but boy, they are going to make a difference in the American economy. And the last thing that I would say is that we have found that intensive support for these students really makes a difference. At the City University of New York, where LaGuardia is one of 7 community colleges, we have a program called ASAP, which is an intensive program that through it's actually intrusive advisement, you don't get away without talking to your advisor every other week, with full-time status, with support for tuition, whatever tuition gap there is, for things as simple as a Metro card, and for really focusing on what you should be doing, going to school all the time. We have found that we are able to double the number of students who graduate in half the amount of time. It's a wonderful program. The challenge is it's an expensive program. It has to be an investment. So we find in ASAP we need an additional about $4,000 per student per year. It's not cheap. But the end, to get that student through in 3 years, means they begin a lifetime of earnings. And so, Chairman and the rest of the committee members, the way to think about community colleges, I think, is to really understand that this is a different group of individuals who really want to make a difference, they don't need a lot. They need a little bit of a helping hand, and then the results are pretty extraordinary. Thank you so much for asking me here for my testimony.
Thank you very much, and now, bear with me here. I didn't say this, we have a 5-minute rule. When the light goes red, it's up, but we're going to be very generous. I don't want you to be intimidated by that. I just try to keep our testimony moving along. Your full statements will all be entered in the record, but say what you want to say, because this committee is extraordinarily interested in it, and particularly given how far and hard you had to trip to get here, we appreciate you arriving. So if we can, I'll move next to Professor Castleman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members the subcommittee. I'm honored to be here with you today to testify about low-cost, scalable strategies to increase college persistence and success, particularly among economically disadvantaged students. We've made considerable progress over the last decade, increasing the share of the populace that pursues post-secondary education. At the same time that we have witnessed improvements in college going, however, gaps in college completion between low and high-income families have only widened over time. Recent innovations highlight the potential for low-cost, scalable strategies to reduce these inequalities. These innovations stem from the growing recognition that targeted information and advising about college and financial aid can play an essential role in helping students and families navigate critical junctures on the road to and through college. Policymakers and educators have long recognized that a lack of access to advising can prevent talented students from going to college, and a wide variety of college access programs have emerged over the years to address this gap. Until recently, however, what we largely failed to recognize is how important sustained advising is for students even after they successfully navigate the college and financial aid application process. During the summer after high school, for instance, high school graduates who've been accepted to college and plan to enroll still have to complete a complex array of financial and procedural tasks in order to successfully matriculate, yet they typically lack access to professional assistance during these months. In a phenomenon that we've called summer melt, my colleagues and I find that 20 to 30% of college-intending high school graduates from urban districts fail to enroll anywhere in the year after high school as a result of challenges they encounter completing these tasks. The good news is that we have developed a variety of innovative and inexpensive solutions to help students navigate these complex processes and continue on the path through college. Much of my own work has leveraged text messaging as a strategy to provide students with personalized college information and to make it easy for them to connect to professional advising when they need help. We can use texting to deliver consolidated bursts of information about tasks that students need to complete with the confidence that, at least for a moment in time, that content will reach students and grab their attention. My colleagues and I have run a series of text messaging campaigns to help reduce summer melt. These texting campaigns cost less than $10 per student, which includes hiring counselors to work over the summer, but can increase the share of college-intending high school graduates who make it to campus by over 10%, with the biggest impacts among the lowest income students. We've also applied these text messaging strategies in a pilot study to encourage college freshmen to successfully renew their financial aid. Community college freshmen who received these messages were 25% more likely to persist through sophomore year than students who didn't receive the texts. I think we're just at the cusp of seeing how technology can be creatively leveraged to help students more effectively navigate what have historically been very complex and challenging decisions. For instance, there's broad recognition of the need to provide students with better loan counseling so they can make informed borrowing decisions. Work is now underway at the Community College of Baltimore County to use text messaging as a channel for connecting students to one-on-one loan counseling from a financial aid professional. Texting is not the only form of interactive technology that we can leverage to connect students to high-quality advising. With support from Bloomberg Philanthropies, several prominent college access organizations are reaching out to tens of thousands of high-achieving high school seniors to offer them sustained virtual college advising. By leveraging interactive technologies like screen sharing and video chat, these advisors can, from thousands of miles away, provide the kind of personalized advising to which these students wouldn't otherwise have access. What sets text messaging and other interactive technologies apart are their low cost and scalability. Any organization with access to students can collect cell phone numbers and consent to message them. I'm proud to be collaborating with the Institute for Education Sciences and Apt Associates to investigate how digital messaging can be leveraged to help gear up students make a successful transition from high school into the first year of college. Federal student aid is similarly well positioned to use personalized digital messaging to help students and their families navigate various stages of the financial aid process. The FAFSA and the loan entrance counseling process both provide ideal access points to collect cell phone numbers and other forms of contact from millions of students who could benefit from simplified information and access to help with these complex decisions. In closing, it's worth emphasizing that the success of these strategies depends on being able to direct students to existing resources, like the federal financial aid and college advising programs. With these resources in place, And as long as students continue to encounter complexities on the road to and through college, creative leveraging of technology offers a low-cost and scalable strategy to improve college persistence and success among disadvantaged students. Thank you again very much for the opportunity to testify before the subcommittee today.
Thank you. Professor Thompson, if we can, we'll move to you for your statements.
Chair Cole, Congressman Fatah, and distinguished committee members, thank you for the invitation and good morning. It is my pleasure being here today representing many Kentucky students both in K-12 and higher education. But I'm also here representing what I believe to be one of the more powerful programs that will address and is addressing what my distinguished colleagues have already mentioned, that's closing the gap. Now, what do we know about closing the gap? We know, especially for low-income students, they are 5 times more likely not to enroll in college. We know that if they do enroll in college, they graduate about half the rate of those that are not low income. And many of these exact sort of demographics can apply to also students of color. Personally and professionally, I have to tell you, I have something to bring to the table on this issue, and President Mellow, I appreciate you offering that personal touch because I'm a first-generation high school student as well as college student. I'm from Central Appalachia. My father was an illiterate coal miner. My mother had an 8th grade education. And I will tell you that the value of education was always talked about in my home. Now, I have to tell you that when they talked about it, I probably interpreted it a little bit different than what they really meant it, but that's okay. That's about building, capacity in a person. My father talked about, boy, you get an education, you get a chance to not be in the coal mines. My mother said you get an education, you have a chance of actually getting money. So both of those obviously are very powerful items. So in the last 2+ decades in my professional career, I've been studying exactly what it takes to reach success for those that are most disenfranchised. And make a long story short, there's 4 big items, 4 big pillars, 4 big building blocks that it takes in order to make it happen. And even though this doesn't work this way, I would want you to imagine these 4 building blocks as being equal in power. The one is the family. We know that the more input a family member has, especially the parents, the greater chance that that child will actually succeed, right? That's previous education also. We also know that community matters. And the community, you guys mentioned this business partnership in Kentucky. We're really into the partnerships with K-12 and higher ed. We know working together we can do that. We also know that peers, by the time they get to be 11 or 12, may be the most powerful influence on that child. And we also, and I will tell you, my mother always said, boy, you hang out with the no goods and you'll be no good. And her point is that if you build a powerful peer relationship, it can be good. The third is the institution itself, and this is where your distinguished committee with very bipartisan efforts have put forth the kind of programs that work. We know that that institution may be the place that many of these folks come to, that they have to actually replicate the first and the second building blocks. And we know that's important. And you may have been reading, US DOE came out and said that some of these efforts are working. We are closing some of these gaps. But Congressman Fatah, I agree with you, it's about opportunity. And the fourth one is the student, him or herself, or the person, him or herself. We have to be able to build the capacity of that person. There's 2 things that we know that we need to build. And I will tell you, Gear Up, what I'm going to talk about in a second, does that. We know we have to be able to teach them how to self-actualize and recognize when they don't have what it takes to be successful. And number 2, going about finding it. You've heard this before, if you give them a fish, they'll eat one time. If you teach them how to fish, they'll eat multiple times. So this is what we're talking about. Gear Up is a competitive 6 or 7-year grant program that funds either states or community partnerships to collaborate in improving the academic, social, and financial readiness of low-income students and increase the number who graduate from high school and enroll in post-secondary education. What's unique about Gear Up, we start early, and we know the earlier you start in elementary or middle school and follow those students through in a cohort fashion, the more input that you can have across those 4 building blocks. Gear Up does that starting in the 7th grade. It provides services to students and families. So we try to build the capacity of those parents and family members to help these students get through. We do mentoring, intrusive advising. We get them on colleges, because much of this we're talking about is the college-going culture. Many of the kids still, I'm from Appalachia, I have to tell you, we still have to get them to believe that college and graduating from high school, being college ready or career ready, gives them a key towards success. Schools, we build the professional, the students, the teachers, and the leadership of that school to be very much a part of this creation of the college-going culture. Why is it unique? As I said, it starts early, from 7th grade all the way through the first year of college. It serves all students in all grades. We believe that building together, raising all tides, get us to where we need to go. It creates partnerships with businesses and community members. Special partnership grants build those unique partnerships that direct itself toward the community issues. We have a state grant. That's building a strategic agenda throughout the state, where Gear Up is a key element, a key portion of our overall state agenda, in which my office actually sits. Gear Up in Kentucky, I want to tell you really quick, when we look at comparing the schools that were not in Gear Up before they got in Gear Up, we see those schools actually increasing their college going rate by 22%. We also see that they actually have great success in the first year of college. We're now in the process of tracking those students as they go through college and see how well they do. Berea has several Gear Up grants, and one of the things that they shared with us that I want to share with you is that students are reading above grade level. They are doing math at 17% more than their other cohorts. And they are actually demonstrating that students who are coming from the most disenfranchised area can have a huge input on the opportunity that you mentioned earlier. So what do we need? We're asking you to continue, but expand the efforts that we know that work. Gear Up is one of the most cost-effective programs that you have, by the way. It serves at $547, the kind of impact that I was just mentioning. That's per student per year. But the need is greater. Less than 1 in 5 applicants for new Gear Up projects received the funding in 2014. We could get a lot more if we could get more funding, obviously. So we are asking that you think about it along these terms. We have $301.6 million right now of appropriations that support over 500,000 low-income students. We know that even just a modest $20 million more dollars would serve at least 35,000 more students, and then you can start calculating above that. Chair, I apologize for going over, but I will tell you that Gear Up works.
Well, you don't need to apologize. First of all, as I'm sure you know, you have the congressional father of Gear Up here, Grin was getting progressively bigger, as
Definitely music to my ears, Chairman.
Yeah, and the only other thing I can say is your mom clearly knew my mom.
I probably believed in behavioral modification.
It's very similar. We seem to have gotten the same parenting advice growing up. If we can, next I want to move to Dr. Fischer, and just a delight to have you here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the subcommittee. I am honored to have the opportunity to testify today about the impact of the TRIO programs on my life. I particularly want to encourage the subcommittee to invest more in the TRIO programs in the fiscal year 2016 so that more students can be served. While TRIO served nearly 880,000 students in 2005, only about 785,000 students are served today, and we very much hope that the House can move towards restoring necessary funding for additional students. So I grew up in a family that didn't value education at all. My home was a very severely abusive one. I missed weeks of school at a time because I couldn't go to school with cuts or bruises or a busted up face. And when I was in the 6th grade, my mom removed my siblings and I from public school under the guise of homeschooling. And as a 6th grader, I became a teacher to my 6 younger siblings and 2 younger cousins who lived with us. I taught them everything I knew, how to read, write, and do math, at least as much as a 6th grader knows, but there was no one to teach me. A few years later, and an abusive marriage later, I was walking through a county fair in Oklahoma when an East Central University recruiter stopped me and asked me if I wanted to go to college. I never even considered going to college because I literally knew nothing about education. I was a 33-year-old single mother of 2 boys and I lacked a lot in the education department. And then there was the issue of money. I honestly didn't know that there was money to help people in my situation. But this wonderful gentleman convinced me that I could and should go to college. So to say that attending college was a challenge is a pretty big understatement. I hadn't been in a classroom since the 6th grade, and I had a lot of catching up to do. Also, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was an imposter, so I was struggling to gather enough courage and confidence to keep going. And then I discovered science, something I hadn't really experienced because of my lack of formal education, and I knew I'd found something that I could be passionate about. The class was general zoology, and that professor kept me on the edge of my seat. I literally wanted to go to class every day. By the end of that semester, I had changed my major to biology, and several professors in the biology department had started to talk to me about a graduate degree and how the Trio McNair Post-Baccalaureate Achievement Program could help me navigate that process. I'd never heard of a Ph.D., and I certainly didn't know how to obtain one. But I loved science, and if it would help me learn more about science and even be able to teach science, I was interested. So the McNair office became my home base for the remainder of my time at East Central University. Now, TRIO programs enable low-income, first-generation students to address the non-financial obstacles that they encounter to prepare for, apply for, enroll in, and complete college. The lack of family support that I describe is certainly not universal among low-income first-generation students, but the presence of major non-financial obstacles together with real financial obstacles are almost always there. For example, I almost always worked 2 or 3 jobs while I was caring for 2 young children and full-time college. And the sense of being different, maybe just not being ready, is so often present for low-income first-generation students regardless of their aspirations and motivations. Ronald McNair himself encouraged students to dare to dream because big things can happen if you dream big and work hard. But sometimes a person doesn't even know how to dream. I didn't know how to dream because I didn't know what to dream about. I didn't know what was available. But the McNair program helped with that. They were so much more than program staff. They became my family and my biggest cheerleaders, and they literally changed my life. They opened my eyes to opportunities that I didn't know were available, and the open door policies of McNair mentors allowed me to keep asking questions until I got answers, and by then I was really hungry for answers and for knowledge. One of the biggest impacts of the program was that students in the program were not treated differently because of their less than ideal backgrounds. In fact, the opposite was true. For the first time in my life, I started to feel like an equal citizen, capable of accomplishing anything I set my mind to. They also fostered this community feeling among the students so that we became a family and we supported each other, not just in classwork, but in personal crises. I persevered in my studies, and I ultimately did complete my doctorate at the University of Iowa. It was in oral microbiology, and I'm now engaged in a postdoctoral research program, and I'm committed to a life of teaching and research, and I discovered that passion through research and teaching opportunities in the McNair program. One of the major reasons to invest in TRIO is the profound change it's able to make in individual lives like mine. Another is its reach. TRIO touched me through a small college in Oklahoma, but with 2,800 programs in every U.S. state and several territories, it's an ideal vehicle for introducing effective approaches to student success, but more funds are necessary to expand and intensify existing services. And I thank you for listening to my story and considering my views.
Well, Dr. Fischer, I want you to know my science teacher kept me on the edge of my seat, too, but was wondering whether or not I could pass. So I'm glad yours was much more successful. I'm going to open up, and an interesting common theme to me in all of your remarks was, frankly, how many different things are necessary. We look at this often as a financial problem, but as all of you have mentioned in different ways, there's a whole panoply of support here, and we know if we provide it, it really pays off. Now, having admitted that up front, I'm also going to put you on the spot collectively, and I'll start with you, Dr. Fischer, and then just work across, and ask you if you had to pick 1 or 2 things that, in your experience, are extraordinarily important for us to focus on as a committee, what would those things do? Because we're usually in the position of having to make choices up here. We never have as much money as we would like. So if you had to say, this is the one that makes a difference, the area that if you have to prioritize, where you would prioritize. I'd love to get your response. So if I can start with you, Dr. Fischer.
That's a big one because it's overall.
Oh, it's very unfair, too.
It is. I think one thing that is really important, first of all, is reaching students as soon as possible. I discovered through my children that they learned a lot about education through me, and they started talking to their friends, and I actually am able to go talk to classrooms in my kids' schools now about this process because they're curious and they want to know, and many of them don't think that they can do this. And so I think that's really important, is to start reaching them as early as possible so that they know what to dream about. And also, while we need money, financial things, many of us work multiple jobs to make this happen while some of us are taking care of kids. We also need the funding to have people available to be there for you because we don't have the support. A lot of us don't have the support that we need.
Thank you very much. Professor Thompson?
Well, you probably know, you probably have guessed, I've asked that in Kentucky several times. The things that we know that we have to do now, we have to be able to build capacity. We have to build on those things that work. We also have to look at how many other folk will have skin in the game to help us to do that. And one of the reasons why I like Gear Up so much, because it's a dollar-for-dollar partnership in what we create and how we do. So we get double, at least, the magnitude out of the federal dollar. But the other thing that I think is important, we have to look at, and I would agree with you, building the holistic capacity of a student. And it has to start early. But we also have to look as we get them through college. And when I say college, I mean in some cases it may just be a one-year certificate. But the idea that many of our students still drop out of college because of this gap that we're talking about. So the need for need-based aid for completion is crucial. I mean, we have research that's coming out on that all the time. So the idea of being able to build holistically the capacity from elementary school all the way through with the right kind of teachers, the right kind of inputs in the schools, and all the way through make sure that they're college ready and career ready when they go into college, but yet giving them the kind of inputs that it takes for them to be successful in college. So holistic, capacity are two of the things that I would argue that I would consider.
Great. Professor Castleman?
My position is much easier coming third in line because I can build on the insightful comments of Dr. Thompson and Dr. Fischer. To reiterate something Dr. Thompson said, I think it's crucial to sustain need-based aid for college. There's a variety of very rigorous research showing long-term benefits from need-based aid on students' outcomes. I have worked with my colleague and mentor, Bridget Terry Long, at Harvard University, showing that a $1,300 need-based grant offered to students at the end of their senior year in high school in Florida increased the share that earned a bachelor's degree within 6 years by over 20%. Wow. I think that's a worthwhile investment in terms of the lifelong benefits that students going to get. So I think it's very important to sustain financial aid. I also think Dr. Fisher's point is very well taken, that even with financial aid in place, students encounter very, very complex decisions in evaluating where to go to college, how to access financial aid, and maintain their aid. And there are critical junctures along that pathway where if students do not complete the FAFSA, they don't apply to a broad set of colleges, they don't renew their financial aid. Students who've worked very hard, showed tremendous promise for themselves and their families, but also for our country, may fall through the cracks. And so I think figuring out ways that we can be smart and strategic in how we make help available to students. And as you heard from my testimony, I think that technology offers us low-cost and scalable solutions to connect hardworking students to one-on-one sustained advising, even if they don't have access to that in their households or their communities.
Thank you. Dr. Fitzgerald?
Mr. Chairman, in the spirit of full disclosure, I spent 17 years as the staff director of the Federal Advisory Committee on Student Financial Assistance. So we've been through a lot of battles over a lot of things, not the least of which was the FAFSA. But I would point to, not to get too technical, but I'd point to two things. First of all, the purchasing of the maximum Pell Grant. Because without a strong Pell Grant program, virtually nothing we're talking about here will work. The second is it's something that we tried to do to clear the information barriers, and it's something we wrote into the, we worked with Congress to write into the higher ed reauthorization in 1998, and that is the automatic zero. And the closer we can get the automatic zero to free and reduced lunch, the simpler the communications challenge becomes. Essentially equating federal benefit, means-tested benefit programs. Obviously, free and reduced lunch is in every school. The ability to communicate with parents about the fact that students would be eligible for a Pell Grant because they are a free and reduced lunch recipient would go a long way to reducing barriers, but it's expensive.
Thank you. And if my friend Mr. Fatah indulges me, I want to allow President Mellow to answer the question, then we'll move to him, and I'll be equally generous on the time.
Again, coming last, I absolutely agree with everything that's been said and said so well. So I'll just take a slightly different tact. I would say that the challenge of America is not just who's in college, but who should be in college. And I see those students who have dropped out of high school, especially in urban areas, especially men. We're having a crisis of men who have dropped out of high school. So I would say let's really look at the higher education continuum as starting with students who have not made it out of high school and really thinking deeply about how our workforce development dollars align with our college dollars in ways that really make sense and hold us to a high standard. But in that, make sure that we use all the available activities that have just been mentioned. And I would especially talk about technology. The work of being like a 911, sort of like get them before they fail, could be so helpful. I've seen students drop out of college because they couldn't find the babysitter when their mom who used to take care of the kids couldn't come. I've seen students walk for 2 hours to college because they didn't have a $100 a month Metro card. So little things can make a big difference, and technology can really help us see that. And the second piece is that I would really talk about deepening partnerships with business and industry, because the need of our students, particularly low-income students, to work is real. And it's real when you have 2 kids and you're working 2 or 3 jobs. It's real when you're thinking about college. So having the ability to make that connection so that the curriculum that I teach at our college is effective for my local community, and that students really have the experience to join with the business, really opens up extraordinary opportunity. One of our students who grew up poor in the Bronx, single mom, said, I've always had dreams, but until I had my internship, I never saw myself in those dreams, and that's what we want to do.
Thank you very much, and I thank my friend for being generous on the time, and Mr. Fatah, you're recognized.
Well, thank you. I'm going to start with Mr. Fitzgerald. You represent the business community. I spent a long time yesterday interacting with one of our leading businesses, IBM. They've been instructive in creating what are called P-Tech high schools, and we are bringing them into Pennsylvania, into Philadelphia, but they've set up these schools in a number of states. A number of states have acted. They create an early college opportunity for the young people we're talking about who are in challenged circumstances. 2 years high school, 2 years, they get an associate's degree in science, and then they get a certificate, a technical certificate year. And so I'm interested, obviously we're interested in every young person being successful, but when you think about the country, one of the reasons that the business community is interested in this is not on the idea of each young person being successful, it's the fact that we need these young people. If our businesses are going to be successful, we need them to be part of the workforce and the leadership for it. So I'm interested in what your sense is, given what we see in our economic competitors in China and India and what they're doing, right, vis-a-vis all of the young people that we are leaving behind, and what that means to American business down the road in terms of finding the people they need.
Mr. Fattah, it's huge, and IBM is a member. Our current chair is Roger Ferguson, who's president and CEO of TIAA-CREF in New York City. Our strategy is to support very unique partnerships between our business and our academic members to build new pathways, including from P-Tech high schools, into very high-demand, high-skill jobs. So, for example, one of the NSF sites is, in fact, part of CUNY, and it's taking those students from a P-Tech high school and transferring them successfully into a baccalaureate program in technology.
And what I'm interested in is what is the flip side of that? What happens if we don't succeed at this effort here? What does that mean? You know, so we've heard, I mean, I've heard from, you know, Bill Gates, other people say, look, we need these people. And if we can't find them here in America to hire, we're going to hire them somewhere else, right?
That's correct.
I mean, so, and given the technological circumstances we live in, X-rays that used to be read and reviewed in Philadelphia, Hahnemann Hospital, are now being read and reviewed in India, right? I mean, I got insurance companies that are sending work via satellite overseas in the morning and getting it back in the evening. We got H&R Block and others who are going to take taxpayers' information and send it to India to do their taxes, to do the math for Americans to file their taxes, to, you know, pony up to, their civic responsibility here. So I'm wondering, what I guess I'm trying to get you to help the committee understand is that this is really not just about whether we're going to help some child somewhere find their future. I see it more that it really is inextricably intertwined with whether America is going to remain the leading nation in the world, whether we actually take kids that we've been kind of leaving in the shadows and give them this shot.
Mr. Fattah, members of the committee, every one of my business members will tell you that there is nothing more important to the success of their firms and the United States than talent. And right now, there is a huge talent gap, and it's not just counts, but it's skills. And this relates also to national security. So one of the fields that we are working in to connect young people to is cybersecurity. And for example, Wes Bush, the chairman and CEO of Northrop Grumman, and Britt Kerwin, the chancellor of the university system, worked together to create the first honors college in cybersecurity in the country to meet the federal government's cybersecurity needs. So in virtually every sector, there are critical workforce challenges, and we need the students from campuses like LaGuardia to be able to see pathways to any level, whether it's a certificate, a baccalaureate, an associate's degree, or a baccalaureate, because my companies, and I know all companies, cannot succeed without that talent. The jobs will go elsewhere.
Thank you. Our ranking member has arrived, Mr. Chairman, and I want to turn the yield the time to Rosa DeLaura.
Okay, well, in that case, we'll go to Mr. Fleischman next, and we'll come to you next if that's okay.
That's fine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to this distinguished panel, thank you all for being here today. I, too, am the first generation to go to college in my family. I had 2 elementary schools, 3 middle schools, and 2 high schools, all in the public education system all around the United States, and it was tough. But to hear the great stories that we heard from you all today and your commitment to education, I just want to thank you, because we cannot fail. I want to hear more success stories for our nation's youth and even some adults who go back to college and get a shot at that great American dream. So I thank you all. My question is for Dr. Mellow today. I see you're from LaGuardia Community College. I know you'll have a great airport there. Former Mayor Fiorello. Yep. Great. Dr. Mellow, given your role as president at LaGuardia Community College and your expertise with workforce development initiatives, my question today is for you. In my district, and that's the 3rd District of Tennessee, we have Chattanooga, Oak Ridge, Athens. It's a wonderful East Tennessee district. There's a growing demand for skilled workers. Educators and businesses are working together to respond to this demand by combining hand-on training experience with classroom instruction. For example, Chattanooga State's Engineering Technology Department has formed a number of unique partnerships designed to provide training for the local workforce that will qualify them for high-tech positions. These partnerships include the Tennessee Building and Construction Institute of Chattanooga, the Institute of Material Joining and Testing, the Tennessee Valley Authority Partnership Program, the Wacker Institute, and the Volkswagen Academy. These programs can offer students a comprehensive learning environment that blends classroom instruction and laboratory instruction with paid on-the-job training experience. These workforce development initiatives have been highly successful and crucial to our local economy, and we need more like them. My question for you is, how can federal and state officials help facilitate partnerships and collaboration between schools and businesses to respond to the growing need of local employers for skilled workers? And I thank you.
Well, and what's happening in Tennessee is just so exciting. It's exactly, I think, what can happen, and it's very different. What's happening in Tennessee should be different than what's happening in Mississippi or what's happening in northern Washington. So the process that you described, I think, is very interesting. One of the things that happens is that there is, when you look at Department of Labor and other, Department of Commerce, other kinds, Department of Agriculture maybe in some places, other kinds of federal agencies that could support that, the support often presumes that those relationships are already made, so that there will be funding for the enactment of that program, rarely for the creation. It's hard work to really create a real partnership. And so part of it is, let's fund the whole line of development. Let's fund the creation of that collaboration. And then on the other end, let's really reward the companies who put their time and effort into that, because it will be a real cost to the companies who have worked hard. So those would be two of my suggestions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mellow. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back.
We can. I'll go to our ranking member next, if she's ready.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My apologies for being late. First of all, I would just like to say I thank you all. I've read all the testimony, so I appreciate your efforts, and this is an important topic for all of us. And, Mr. Chairman, what I'll do is I'm not going to make any opening statement. I'll just get it for the record and so forth. I'll just move to questions. And I would just like to say to Dr. Mellow, I thought I recalled your name and seeing you and listening to you, and it was on November 3rd, 2011, where you came to the Democratic Steering and Policy Committee hearing, Reigniting the American Dream, America's Entrepreneurial Story, is the centerpiece of the committee's work, etc., and where you were outstanding in terms of what is going on at LaGuardia Community College. And I'm a very, very big believer in community colleges. I do believe that they should be front and center in our education system, that they are the path for the middle class. And you get the range of the students, younger but older, people who self-select to get an education. I'm excited. Kids reach the community college level, or older Americans do in that regard, without all the math, reading, and writing skills. And you may have talked about this already. So we need to deal with the kind of remedial attention that they need in order to be able to deal with developing further their education. My understanding is when developmental education students enter college, they succeed at a lower rate than their peers, and then only 15% of these students earn a degree or certificate within 3 years. A number of reforms have been tried, and I'm excited to learn about your accelerated study and associate programs, ASAP intervention. You've had significant success in boosting college completion rates for these students. What was the most critical piece of this intervention? And a follow-up is, what funding was used to support the initiative? I know that the program in the long term reduces costs by getting students through school more quickly, but it must have been a substantial investment up front. How can this intervention be replicated on other campuses with limited resources?
Those are really important questions. I'll start out by why it worked. It did work because it really eliminated the barriers that most low-income students face to get a degree. So it eliminated the need for multiple part-time jobs. It provided the ability to go to college full-time. One of the reasons when we say students didn't graduate in 3 years is because they're going part-time. They went full-time a semester and now they're working or taking care of kids. And so part of the challenge is let's get the metrics right. And one of the things that IPEDS, our national database, doesn't do is really capture the complexity of today's community college student. The New York City experiment was really funded in multiple ways, primarily, though, from the city of New York. We had extraordinary support from Mayor Bloomberg and now from Mayor de Blasio. It took a while. We really took a while to perfect it. We are talking with other colleges in other states. But I would say it does point to what I think is a hard truth, that for low-income students for whom our public education system has not been supportive for them, or for whom life has gotten in the way, that we are going to make a serious investment. The other thing I would say is that some of the other experiments that have been powerful are really about accelerating the move through developmental education. We do it through contextualization. We do it through summer immersion programs. The issue is that it's a deficit that we want to overcome. I also think there's a growing national movement to rethink the kind of mathematics that has been a barrier. What we find is that if you go into healthcare, if you go into a lot of businesses, not if you go into engineering, not if you go into science, but into many, many other forms of very productive professional work, statistics is as powerful a quantitative analysis as learning to factor a quadratic equation, which frankly, as a college president, I haven't done recently, but I use statistics all the time. And so part of it is that when we work more closely with business and say, okay, we academics, we always thought it had to be algebra. Working with you, what do you really need? So I think we have to attack it in all those multiple ways, through funding, through intensity, through the wraparound services, the intensive advising, the support that students got, but also rethinking our curricular structures to really make a difference for adults and for students today.
I'd just love to know, and you can get back to me, is you said you're talking to other states. Who are you speaking to, and how is that going? And others who might be replicating your system. Thank you, Mr.
It's being
Chairman.
replicated in Ohio.
In Ohio,
Yes.
Ohio. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you. If we can, just by way of arrival, we'll go to my friend Mr. Dent from Pennsylvania next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all of you for being here this morning. It's been a very interesting panel. I wanted to just talk a little bit about the Obama administration's proposal for a free community college. And I just heard Mr. Fleischman make some interesting comments about the Wacker training programs in Volkswagen, which are very targeted, very successful. I'm aware of what many of the German companies are doing in the United States, trying to replicate to the best of their ability their very successful apprenticeship programs here. Very effective. At the same time, you know, I've been very much interested in Gear Up and TRIO programs in my district that I think have been effective, helping a lot of students who may have not had a background, or families that have background in higher education, help them move forward with their education and careers. But I'm deeply concerned about the community college program because the free community college is, well, one, it's not based on need. I have 2 children in college. I'm paying 2 tuitions. I don't think that the government should be paying for my children's tuition at a community college or anywhere else, given my circumstances and others like me. And I'm not complaining, but I'm just saying it's not based on need. It's not targeted. I always thought the federal government's role in higher education should be very specific, and that we should focus on science, technology, engineering, and math, need-based assistance, and programs like the ones that some of you are representing here today. And I'm concerned that we'd be diluting our resources very much, that these community colleges will no longer be community colleges, but become federal colleges, because in my state, the local communities have a very difficult time meeting their obligations to the community colleges, and the states and tuition are forced to play a greater role. If the community colleges see the feds are going to pay up, I suspect many of the local communities will invest less. And then we will have to make up the difference, and it'll almost be like the Medicaid program. in terms of the burden that would fall on the states at some point down the road if federal commitment isn't there. So I'd like to hear your comments on this about the idea of free community college, and how would it impact programs like those that you work with TRIO and Gear Up?
Are you asking me? Okay. Free college, I have one in college and one that's going into college next year, and that sounds great. But I feel like the biggest need is to find the people who aren't in college, to access people or people who are going to college but they're not likely to make it, and I think the money would be better spent in programs to help those students navigate their way through college and support them in college and maybe help them to move on, like I did, to higher levels of education, because without that we're not going to have people. And there are people like me out there who didn't know that this was an option, and it may or may not help me to get there without the support. And I really think the money to help support the people while they're in there is very helpful.
So essentially you're saying that we should target these funds
Yes.
much more than
I-
a broad,
Yes,
just throw all the money out there and,
correct.
okay.
In Kentucky, we don't have community support community colleges. It's state-supported and tuition-supported.
All state and tuition, no
Oh,
county government
no
or school
county,
district support?
No, which has been very problematic to us, because I do believe that community colleges should be our low-cost alternative to some of our four-year institutions. And I would have no problem with my children going to community colleges. What I do feel that we could do is be able to help the students that may not have money for access to go to community colleges. I will say another item, and I'm glad the ranking member actually made this statement. One way of looking at many of our community colleges they have students that are in remedial need. If we help K-12 slow that down and help them, we won't have as much of that in our community colleges or in Kentucky, many of our four-year institutions. My argument is that whether we have free community colleges or not, we've got to figure out a better way to get more students engaged in some low-cost alternatives, and I believe community colleges could be that direction. We could do that with financial aid, need-based aid, and so on, but we've got to, more than just access, we've got to help them to succeed, because it's better to keep them than try to recruit them again. The last statement I will make about this is that when we look at students that are highly engaged for a variety of reasons, whether they have the income or not have the income, if they're highly engaged, then they have a greater chance of getting success. In other words, we need to target our dollars toward that engagement, whether it's in K-12 with programs like ours, or whether it's in the community colleges or other four-year institutions, whereby they can actually get involved at a deeper level than we see many of them having the opportunity now. In Kentucky, we have almost 1 million students that are adult learners that could come back, that have some college degree. So we need to target dollars toward getting many of these students back engaged to become active members of the workforce.
Thank you. My time has expired, and I yield back.
Thank you very much. If I can, I'll go to my good friend from California, gentlelady, Ms. Lee.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank our witnesses, our panel, for being here today. And I want to ask you a couple of questions. Well, first, let me just preface it by saying now a lot of attention is focused on the non-traditional student. It's nice to see that, because now I know that I was a non-traditional student. I wondered what I was, okay? Let me tell you. I was a single mom with 2 kids on public assistance, receiving food stamps, work study. I couldn't live on campus because I had 2 kids. Daycare was so expensive, I had to take my children to school with me, the whole 9 yards. Now, fortunately, in the day, I could stay on public assistance while going to college, and I could stay on food stamps. And I wanted to ask you, as it relates to now the budget cuts, as it relates to food stamps, and under welfare reform, the time limits and the work requirements, what are you seeing in terms of students like myself, and how difficult or easy it is now for them to complete college? That's the first question. Secondly, as it relates to formerly incarcerated individuals, there's a lifetime ban on Pell Grants if you've been in jail. Once you've paid your dues, once you've completed your time, many of us believe you deserve a second chance. Yet this lifetime ban on Pell Grants prevents people who have already been punished, who are out trying to take care of their families. They continue to be punished because they can't receive Pell Grants to go to college. Could you kind of tell me what you think about that? And do you think that's a reasonable policy, or do you think we need to look at changing that to provide access to formerly incarcerated individuals, which are primarily African American and Latino men?
Let me start with your first question, which is, it is hard for poor people who are accessing social supports to continue in college, and yet, like you, so many are. And so all I can say is that those are hurdles that are placed in front of people, and the extraordinary challenges are often faced, and then we see successful role models like yourself. So I'm going to go back and tell all my students to look you up. And
Yeah, but tell your students also there was a safety net in place
Yes.
that hadn't been gutted or cut.
Right, it's hard.
And-
It's hard.
Okay.
And we work at many community colleges work very hard to maximize social support so students can really get what they need. And probably my chancellor is not ready for me to say this, but I feel very strongly that looking very deeply at issues around punishment and redemption, that looking at what should be an American role for individuals who have both committed a crime and paid for that crime and the punishment that we said, what should we do to bring those individuals back into society? I think that is an extraordinarily important issue. I think it has to be carefully analyzed. When I think of my student body now, who do I want to invite in? Who do I want sitting next to, some 19-year-old at, 9 o'clock at night when she's just worked all day? I mean, those are tough questions, but we haven't had that dialogue in a very long time. When I was 24, I taught in the Maryland minimum security prisons. It was the scariest walk through the prison, I don't know what you call it, the yard, that I've ever had in my life. And they were the most extraordinary learners I had ever met. And so I think the challenge, we have to engage in this, because otherwise we have doomed generations of people to have no way back into society. And so I very much agree that while it's tough, and I'm not sure where I would fall, that the time to have that kind of serious dialogue is now.
Mr. Thompson.
Let me speak as an African-American man. Without a doubt, education is almost a cure-all for all those things that you mentioned. Whether or not they'll be on public assistance or in prison, we know that there's a direct correlation. Some would even argue causal analysis. I'm a statistician, but it's been a few years since I've done that too. To say that education truly is the preventative measure by which we not get there, but I will tell you this, we have a crisis in this society, and we have to admit that crisis, and much of that falls around men, yes, but African American men in particular. If we're not getting these folks engaged somehow, or re-engaged, then I think we are losing a key element of who we are as a society. So my argument simply is this: whether or not it's as simple as letting them have voting rights or getting them involved in other activities to come to be reacclimated to society, whatever it takes, we better figure out a solution. Because if we keep seeing what's happening in our society based on this disenfranchisement, then I think we're going to end up having many more issues than we could ever think about having.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hope we can talk about this in terms of barriers to accessing higher education at some point from this committee, because there's certain issues I think that could be bipartisan that we need to work on that I think both sides could agree on.
Yeah, I would like to work with the gentlelady on this and find some way to do this, because and a lot of this would, to me, get down to where if we remove the ban, then what do we do to empower you to be able to make discriminating decisions? I don't want you to have to automatically, I want you to be able to exercise judgment in a way that we can't from a distance, but you might be able to. But I think my friend raises a really good point that we ought to continue to look at. So thank you very much for bringing it up.
Thank you very much.
Okay, if we can, I'm going to go with my good friend from the gentlelady from Alabama, Ms. Roby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here today, and thank you all for your sincere commitment to help Americans succeed. So I really appreciate what each of you do. Just yesterday, I met with TRIO representatives from my state, Alabama, and as you know, TRIO dollars are so important to work with first-generation low-income college students. And we know that there are tremendous success stories with TRIO, with programs starting as young as the 6th grade. And so my first question is, what, and any of you feel free to jump in, but what grade do you think is the perfect time for, in a perfect world, for early intervention to help these children succeed? Anybody? All of you.
Well, I will tell you that we know that if you're not able to read or be at grade level by grade 3, you're in trouble, right?
Right.
So I'm going to argue early childhood education is super important. But I'm going to also argue that that has to be a continual effect, because we also know even high-performing 3rd and 4th grade students that are low income or of color tend to lose that trajectory by the time they get to high school, because we're not having the kind of intervention that we need to have in order to keep them going in that direction. So once again, we talked about Gear Up and these TRIO programs. Gear Up starts in their 7th grade. My argument is that we should even back that up somewhat. But when you look at early childhood education, we have to do something about that. We just have to, right? But we also know that we can't just do that. We're going to have the kind of intervention that we're trying to do with our TRIO programs and Gear Up in the earlier years. But I would say starting heavily, once again, in the 4th and 5th grade.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Well, thank you very much. I think it's a very important question. I very much agree with Dr. Thompson. I think there's a lot of very good long-term rigorous research saying that investments in quality preschool education and early learning opportunities generate long-term benefits that affect whether students go to college and are successful, that affect how much they earn, and that affect their health, their criminal behavior, or lack thereof. And so I very much agree that the earlier we can make investments in education, the longer benefits we can generate. At the same time, I imagine as a committee, you are constantly wrestling with the question of where do you direct the scarce resources that you as a committee, we as a country have access to. And I believe that I certainly agree with Dr. Thompson about starting early. I think there are millions of students across the country who have done the hard work to be academically ready, and in many cases socially ready for college, and struggle when they get to junior and senior year to identify colleges that are a good match for their abilities and interests, and that struggle to access the financial aid that our country makes available to students if they complete the application. There are hundreds of thousands, if not over 1 million students who would qualify for aid who do not apply. And I think for the committee's work, as you continue to invest in education broadly, hopefully, I think there's an opportunity to make very targeted, low-cost investments for academically ready students in their junior and senior year that can lead to substantial improvements in the share of traditionally underrepresented students who are able to get to and then be very successful once they're in college.
Here, here.
Key. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
I will just take a slightly different tact, and I'm going to use Dr. Fischer's words, who went to college and was the first in her family to go to college and has young children who watched her go to college since she did it as a returning adult. And the other way to think about dealing with low-income students who are in those TRIO programs are also that sometimes their parents are going to community colleges, and really thinking about that as also an investment in a community. There's nothing so powerful as seeing your mom or dad study
Sure.
as a role model.
Sure. Dr. Castleman and Dr. Thompson, how do colleges and universities and organizations ensure students and student services are coordinated? Especially for students with disabilities, and I've got just a little bit of time, so.
I think that's a crucial question. As I said earlier in my testimony, the more you can coordinate these efforts, the greater impact you'll have. And we have to start thinking about critical mass, right? So the idea, we may not ever be able to measure exactly what inputs or formative outputs that each of these individually have, but what we know is that once they are coordinated under one umbrella that focuses on particular goals and outcomes, then the greater chance that all of them will have a larger capacity. But my argument is just not those programs that are located within those walls. It's also getting community resources to buy into this. Businesses are able to do this. Churches are able to do this, right?
Sure.
It's being able to develop peer leadership programs that they can build. So it's taking those and then doing a SWOT analysis, if you will, and looking at where the holes are.
Right.
To build that capacity. So in the short amount of time I have, I'll just say this, that's what all of us should be doing within the four walls, looking at how they can be better coordinated, and then doing a SWOT analysis and see what else we can put into it from outside the walls.
Thank you. I'm sorry, my time expired, Mr. Chairman.
Now, if you'd like to go ahead and finish that answer, please do, Mr. Castleman.
No, sir, I don't have anything to add beyond what Dr. Thompson shared.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Again, we'll go to the other gentlelady from California, Ms. Roybal Allard.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Many colleges and universities offer accelerated degrees, which allow students to work through the traditional summer break to finish their degrees faster. And this is particularly important, as has been mentioned, to low-income students who are often motivated to enter the job market as quickly as possible. It's my understanding that these programs also help with retention, as students face a gap semester, are less likely to come back the following semester and are more likely to drop out altogether. And unfortunately, Pell Grants now only cover tuition from fall to spring. And that means that students who wish to accelerate their studies have to either take out more loans or skip summer classes altogether. The year-round Pell Grant offered some relief in 2010 and 2011, but unfortunately was eliminated in 2012. I recently spoke with President Covino at Cal State LA University about the year-round Pell Grants. And based on his observations and experiences, he found that these grants actually help students to graduate in a more timely manner and improve the university's graduation rates. Dr. Mellow, I'll start with you. Did you find this to be true at LaGuardia Community College? And what would be the impact of restoring the year-round Pell Grant for low-income students? And what would be the benefits of reinstating this program, say, for example, to our economy?
It really was a wonderful program. When you see students struggle so hard to get through a semester, and the gears are starting to turn, they're sort of getting into it, and then Pell no longer covers summer, it slows them down. And to build up that energy, we talked about you need to not only do the academic work, but you have to change a mental model of yourself. And when you go back to, washing dishes or doing luggage at LaGuardia Airport from, 12 to 6 a.m., it takes that away from you. So we found that sort of sunshine that's shown on us for a little bit of time with the year-round Pell was very important for exactly the reasons that you stated.
Okay. Yes.
The other issue that I think is worth mentioning, and I imagine many on the committee are aware of this, is that one of the challenges I think we face in increasing the share of students who earn a degree is the extended time in which it takes students to complete. You all probably know that 50% roughly of first-time college students earn a degree within 6 years. The time to degree is actually growing over time. And I think finding ways, like students being able to take courses over the summer, can increase the speed with which they can earn a bachelor's degree or an associate's degree That's certainly beneficial, I think, to our economy to have smart, well-trained people entering the labor market earlier. It may also be very beneficial to the student in reducing how much they need to borrow. I think year-round Pell is one approach to that. I think the ASAP program that President Mellow discussed is another very innovative and promising solution. I want to draw attention, some of you may be aware of an organization called Complete College America that works with 34 different states to develop other innovative solutions, like increasing the number of credits students complete during the academic year, increasing the share of students who get intrusive advising, to use President Mellow's phrase, and providing students more structure and guidance around their course taking to choose courses that move them more effectively towards a degree. I think all of these strategies are very important to reduce the time it takes students to earn a degree so that they can get out in the labor market, get better jobs, reduce the amount of loan burden. And I do think that additional Pell funding during the summer could be part of that solution.
Thank you. President Obama's America's College Promise initiative would help make college more affordable for community college students across the nation. However, tuition is just one component of the cost of attending community college, and many low-income students already receive free or reduced tuition or fees in different states. The Community College League of California has found that other costs of college, including textbooks, transportation, and living expenses, are far more substantial and far more likely to prove a barrier to student success. Would there be a value in allowing flexibility in funding for this initiative beyond just tuition and fees? And is there a better way to target this initiative so that it makes community college more financially accessible to low-income students?
I'll quickly say that one of the things that's important, I think, is to understand that so many of these students, because they're low income and because community colleges are relatively low cost, tuition is one part of the problem. But the other thing you do when you apply with your FAFSA is to really understand the gap. And the average gap in terms of what a student actually needs at LaGuardia to maintain their ability to go to college is on average $7,000 of unmet need. So I think what we're talking about is a huge watershed moment in American history. It used to be that a high school diploma was enough. We are now saying for our country to be competitive, it has to be more. And I think the challenge is, what should we do to allow students to get what they need for our country and for our economy?
And let me just add, especially in community colleges, I think this is true. Life intervenes with many of these students. And when we see students dropping out, it's for financial reasons mainly. And it's not just tuition. Very seldom it is tuition. It's a variety of other inputs that happen in their lives, whether it's the family issue or can't afford the books. We've seen students literally. We looked at them. I was on a campus for many years as the enrollment manager and head of retention and student success. And we were a campus that served a lot of first-generation low-income students from Appalachia. And we saw many of these students who had full rides, if you will, as far as we think of full rides in college. But they hadn't gotten their books 3 weeks into the semester, or 4 weeks into the semester, because they didn't have the money to do so. And with that, what we found out, these students could not catch up. So it's that, and I wanted to add one other thing to my friend here and even the Pell Grants. We have to do more in colleges with structured degree programs, having accelerated opportunities, but also having developmental education, figure out a way to make those hours count better and stop the gateway course problems or the barriers. But we also know that if we could use financial aid in a more efficient manner toward helping students succeed, where there's financial aid for books or a variety of other issues, I think then we have a better opportunity of getting more of these students across that barrier.
Thank you.
The chair wishes to advise people, when you hear the whistling, that is the wind, okay? That is not the mics. That's just one of the peculiarities of our building. We've tried for years to deal with this, but it quite often makes a dramatic point when you've risen, so I want you to be aware. If I can, I want to go to my friend, Mr. Harris from Maryland.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for holding the hearing. You know, it's a as a university faculty member on leave, I mean, I have an intense interest in making sure that our workforce is educated and the best in the world to compete. But I'm sorry I had to step out because I have, we have the Agriculture Committee, Subcommittee meeting in a big rural district, so I was over there. But actually, one of the topics that we just discussed about over there actually is important to this. And again, I haven't heard all the testimony answers, so I don't know if you've touched on this. But we've all been talking about, I hate to say it, more or less traditional approaches to education. Classroom-oriented, things like that. But my teenagers learn in a very different way. When my son had trouble with algebra, he went on the Khan Academy, and he learned more online than he learned in a traditional classroom. And you know what? It was free. And there are these people who think that given the new technology and given the new generation, look, I don't know, I probably have enough bias that it would be hard for me to do, but my daughter in nursing school, this semester, 2 of her courses are the ones she has to actually touch patients, so she can't do that online. The other 3 are online courses. I got to believe that if we the great equalizer in the world is the internet. If we give people access, now we will need things like intrusive advising so that we make certain, because people who teach online tell me that's the problem. The student's not there, you can't, you don't know when they're falling behind, so you do have to track it. It becomes a different way of teaching. But my gosh, if you want to equalize education, this is a tremendous opportunity. I'm not sure, and I want to hear how in the areas in which you operate, how are you using this tremendous opportunity, because the cost. And President Mellow, that once you take it outside traditional classroom, university and capital and all the rest, we bring down the cost way down. So how are we using this new technology, this new ability to teach, in order to achieve what we're talking about here today? Because I think you can actually educate at a lower cost, not a higher cost, if you do it right and you use some of these new technologies. So again, it's wide open. Anyone who wants to address it, how do we do this? I mean, my understanding is, I guess the University of Georgia, some said, look, we could do this, $10,000, we could educate someone, give them a 4-year college education if it's online and we do it right. I'm not sure you can do all of it online. There's some things, you just have to learn in person. But again, wide open, what do you think, what are your thoughts on this? How do we go forward? How can we encourage this on this subcommittee?
Dr. Harris, I very much appreciate the question, and I agree with you that I think much of the exciting development in higher education, and in education more broadly, is figuring out how to leverage technology to deliver content in at least more cost-effective ways, but potentially in more pedagogically informed ways. So I think there's interesting work with tablets, for instance, that can be responsive to students and make learning more personalized. I think there are a variety of programs that provide online education that allows students who wouldn't otherwise have the opportunity to participate in college to do so. And so I think there's a tremendous amount of promise in practice. I think that the quality varies substantially. And so I think there are some online college programs, for instance, where instead of a person lecturing in a classroom in a building, they're now lecturing on a video, and students may not be getting a lot of value. I think that some programs struggle with issues of attrition and student engagement. I should say, by way of full disclosure, that my mother is the dean of a school of continuing education that certainly thinks about these issues, and so I get to hear her perspective often on this. What I would suggest, from my perspective, that I think the federal government can do is provide support for the further development of innovative practices around technology-based education or technology-infused education, but to structure those programs in a way that the providers have to rigorously evaluate what they're doing. Because I think our greatest need, in some ways, is not the development of additional innovation. We should do that. But our greatest need is to better understand the relative success and efficacy of the different innovative practices that are currently on the market to help inform policymakers and educators of where to then invest more substantially.
Let me just add, because the issue was, a lot of students that we're talking about have 1, 2, 3 part-time jobs. It's hard for them to schedule Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 6 to 7:30 at night at the community college. Again, with the internet, you don't need it. My son goes on Khan Academy at 10:30 at night till 10:45, and that's it, and he can schedule it in. So with that.
Let's take it one step farther. I mean, I've been a professor a lot of decades. I won't tell you how old I am either. But I will tell you that the sit and get is long over. I mean, we're going to have to think of that. Don't get me wrong. There is a need to have face-to-face interaction with students and engagement in a variety of ways. But you can engage also online. What we found out in Kentucky, and our community colleges have led the way here, is competency-based education. The idea that many of the folk are coming to the table with a lot of knowledge already, and we haven't been able to measure how much knowledge that is. Now we can. I mean, with credit for prior learning, but also that as they reach a certain level of competency, they can move on when ready. So it's more than just online education, and it's more than just thinking about online education purely as a way of delivering instruction. I think we have to get better at this. We just got a couple of our campuses, our four-year campuses, who, with our community colleges, got an experimental site from USDOE to allow for Title IV dollars to be used in this approach that we're piloting. So there are ways that we need to be thinking about this. There are ways that we can also get interaction from the workforce or the employers to help us to understand exactly what are those competencies in addition to what we feel as us professor types that are needed in order to create the kind of degree in a faster manner that would be more of an employable opportunity for these students.
Thank you. Yield.
Thank you very much. I think my friend from Maryland makes a really important point about, because we're all worried about cost and we're worried about resources, so we're constantly searching. But also reflect back on my time when I used to teach in college, or my time as a student, or just being around. And so often, you know, it's one thing to learn online if you're used to doing that and you're at home surrounded by a family that's supportive. It's quite another thing if nobody in your home's ever gone to college. I mean, you start there. So, you know, these things work for some kids, and they just simply don't for other. Dr. Fischer, I want to call on you because I think, and all of you have such wonderful, unique personal experiences, but I found so often when I look at students, it is actually the intangible stuff that makes the difference. It is a role model when you don't come from a family that has them. It is, as you mentioned in your testimony, the support system around you, quite often from people moving through exactly similar circumstances to you, and it's having seen somebody else succeed, you sort of know that you can. So I'd like you to reflect both on your own career and your interaction with students now as a professional about those intangible things. And you know, we can't programmatically create those things, but we do programs like TRIO where the odds of that happening go way up for a student, as opposed to when I used to teach at the University of Oklahoma as a graduate student and an adjunct professor. I used to see kids showing up that were living in dormitories that were bigger than the towns they were from. And you put a kid in a dormitory with 1,000 other kids that are their age, and I guarantee you don't have a socially reinforcing learning experience going on there most of the time. So anyway, your reflections would be most welcome, and your suggestions would be helpful.
Okay. The non-financial aspects are huge. I was considering your question, Dr. Harris, because in the situation that I was in, even if online education were free and available at that point, I would have never even considered doing it because I didn't have the support or even knowledge or understand that I could. And so coming into a program where I had McNair is very unique, I believe, because the professors on campus serve as advisors, and so every time I was going through the halls, there was this connection between professors and advisors, and they were constant support, and everywhere I was, there were people telling me that I could do it and that I was doing a good job, and you do learn through that process. I think that's probably even more important than the financial, although you can't get through it without the financial. You just can't make it without those intangible things like people there all the time to support you and show you that you can.
Any of the rest of you have, again, specific strategies or examples? Again, that's just very helpful to hear, because learning is not an easily programmable, you know, technical process. It's a very human process, and everybody approaches it in a different way and usually from a different starting point.
Mr. Chairman, one of the challenges that we're confronting is the attrition rate in the first 2 years of college. This is particularly problematic among STEM majors. 50% of STEM majors drop out of the major in the first 2 years, and a surprisingly high percentage drop out of college, even though they are well prepared. And so one of the strategies that we're using, and again, this is informing partnerships with our business members, as we create these new programs in data science and cybersecurity, social mobile cloud technologies, risk analysis and management, water materials science, et cetera, is to use the company's employees as mentors, to connect them to workforce, to a career. The honors program in cybersecurity at College Park is sponsored by Northrop. Every one of those students gets a Northrop engineer as a mentor. Each can contribute or can compete for early internships that make a huge difference. Now, this assumes they've arrived on campus, and we're focused on just preserving human capital. But those connections, whether they're mentors when students are in high school, and Northrop and our other defense contractors do a lot of that through Cyber Patriot and First Robotics and other kinds of programs. But encouraging mentorships can be exceptionally powerful.
I have to tell you, I've seen the Northrop Grumman program actually in Lawton, Oklahoma, which is a STEM program deep into the high schools. This is a high school that is now our highest performing high school in the state, and the corporate involvement there, that happens to be the home of the field artillery, and there's a big demand for computer programmers and for people that can work on very sophisticated weapon system. And what they've done there, number one's been wonderful for the community, but number two, in terms of providing a local workforce that can move into some of the operations they have there, it's just been absolutely fantastic. So appreciate you making that point. With that, if I may, I'll go to my good friend, the ranking member from Connecticut.
Thank you, Dr. Fitzgerald. I would just say that working with some of our high schools in my community, with Platt Tech and others who work with United Technologies and so forth, and some of our small businesses, our manufacturing small businesses, who help to train these youngsters and then put them to work after. It's an internship, it's an apprenticeship, it's all of the above, and it has proved to be remarkably successful. I would just let you know this piece of information, that there was a budget rolled out yesterday, that if any and all of you are interested in the Pell Grant, the budget that was rolled out yesterday would freeze the Pell Grant dollars at the current level, and that would freeze it for the next 10 years. I think that's not very forward-thinking, but I mention it to all of you as educators that you should engage in the debate and discussion around that issue. Dr. Castleman, a pleasure to see you. Mr. Chairman, Dr. Castleman was an intern in my office in 1994, so yay team here, this is great.
Before or after you were a doctor?
Well
before.
So clearly, you had the appropriate role model and you were driven to success.
Well, from Madison, Connecticut. I have a couple things on technology. I want to ask you, Dr. Mellow, about faculty at community colleges and their intermittents, part-time, adjunct, et cetera. Dr. Castleman, we've talked about technology, and we've talked about you have looked at this text messaging in addressing the summer melt issue. How would that strategy work? I won't go through all of this effort, and it is cheaper, I might add, at about $7 a student to move in this direction. How would that interact with something like TRIO or Gear Up? What are the barriers that would that exist to allowing this to go to scale?
I think that's a great question. I'm very excited to be here just a week after or so. It appeared in the Federal Register that Gear Up is directly embracing these strategies in collaboration with Institute for Education Sciences and with Apt Associates to launch a national demonstration project on how Gear Up can use digital messaging like text messaging to provide students with personalized reminders throughout the summer after high school, but continuing into college as a low-cost way to support students after they've gone through the wonderful support of the Gear Up program to continue to succeed in college. And so I think that's already happening within Gear Up. I think there are also lots of opportunities for this to be integrated into other dimensions of the federal government's higher education-related programming, like federal student aid, like and within that, the loan entrance counseling process. In order for these technologies to scale, they are not expensive. The messaging itself, sending students personalized messaging, requires about $1 per student per month that we want to send messages, as a ballpark. And what we need in order to do that is an access point through which we can collect contact information. The FAFSA provides a tremendous access point. We know the FAFSA is already collecting some contact information. It could expand to collect others, and once students have submitted the FAFSA, we could be using that as an access point to provide much more personalized and behaviorally informed information that helps students understand the stages of the financial aid process that follow completion of the FAFSA, like verifying their income if they're required to by the Department of Education, like considering their loan eligibility. So we need an access point, and again, I think the federal government has several. I think these campaigns benefit when we are able to make the information personalized to students, so to the extent we can leverage information in the FAFSA that Gear Up has collected from students, and say, dear Aaron, here's some messaging that's specific to you. I think that further enhances the success. And then finally, what I would say is that I think one way well-designed messaging can be effective. I think we also know, as Dr. Fischer talked about earlier, that many of these decisions were made sufficiently complex that in addition to getting personalized reminders through technology like text messaging that young people are engaging with, having the opportunity to write back to a message, to connect one-on-one to a college or financial aid professional can also be important. So that may be an additional need for them to be successful.
Will we have another opportunity?
We will go through one more round. I'll go to Mr. Harris, and then you and I will sort of close it out, if that's okay.
Terrific.
Mr. Harris, no question? Sure.
Okay.
Well, okay, so we get split the last 10 minutes here. I wanted to actually make a point and then ask a question. And I want to, number one, again, thank all of you, which I'll do at the end. But, you know, each one of you, I think, have shown how much these programs that I think are the classic hand-up, not hand-out programs make a huge difference for us. How important it is. Mr. Fatah made this point. Mr. Fitzgerald, you've all made it one way or the other. How important to us as a country, just simply to use the human talent that we have available. And secondly, I mean, it's the right thing to do, no question, but it's also it's the smart thing to do. These are investments that ultimately really, really pay off for this country. Looking across, because some of you think internationally, not just nationally, we've been focused here. Give us, and I'll let any of you pick up on this. Actually, you know, Dr. Mellow, you may be the appropriate one to kick it off, but I'm very interested in where you would rank us relative, looking at other countries and what they're doing. I mean, there was a time when we were the unquestioned leader in the world and we provided more access than anybody else. We know that's changed a little bit, but I'm very curious about where you think we are and if there are any international strategies that you see in other places around the world that we ought to be adopting here.
Well, it's true, Chairman, that and we could we could talk for a long time about the parsing of the statistics, and there can be a lot of conversation about that. We're academics, right? We love that kind of stuff. But I would say America is slipping. And for me, people of my, so I'm 62, now you know, people of my generation are more educated, and when we were educated, than anybody else in the world. When you look at the 20 to 24, they are about 13th, and they're less educated than our generation. So we're slipping internally. Our kids are not as educated as we are, as, you know, the budding elders. I don't know what group I'm in. But we're slipping internationally. And I think our acknowledgement of that has to be serious. I don't think in any way it means that Americans are less smart, less gutsy, less committed, but I think we have to really rethink how we imagine an education system, K-12 through college and how to bring back in those adults.
Thank you. Any others care to address that, Mr. Thompson?
Absolutely. And let me tell you, in Kentucky, we have something called Kentucky Rising now, where we're taking the best K-12 countries around the world, and we're emulating what they do right, and we're trying to replicate that in Kentucky. We want to stay cutting edge on reform in that area so they can tell us stuff. I would agree with Dr. Mellow, but I will say that we have, by the way, gaps are the biggest things that we see that are creating some of the issues that make us not as powerful in many ways in our overall growth. But I will tell you, we still have the best higher education system in the world. I mean, this is a baseline that we can play with and build off of. We still have some of the best intervention programs to try to address some of our ills. We talked about Gear Up and McNair and other TRIO programs today. So there are hopes that we can look at. One other item I will add, we've also recognized, and we're a heterogeneous nation. I mean, so many of our comparisons look very homogeneous in many ways, and I wish to have more time to talk about that, but you know what I mean. I will tell you, just like whether it's online education or face-to-face, engagement still matters, so faculty still matters. So we know we're going to have to increase the output of our teacher ed folk to help them to engage those issues in our K-12. But we also know the interaction with faculty in and out of the classroom helps the retention rate. That engagement still matters. So we have the evidence of what to do. So our baseline is strong. Now, whether we get the right inputs to help us to build that baseline, I think is what you guys are called to talk about. But we know high rigor, high expectations, and high inputs all the way through the system of education helps us to actually get back to where we need to be and where we once were forever. I mean, I like being number one.
Yeah, we know that in Kentucky. My chairman, and I think we're going to see a pretty convincing demonstration of it in short order, too. Anybody else care to make a comment?
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to highlight I'll give you two examples of the ability to find talent. Then these are, I won't name them, but they're two of my member companies. And it deals with computer science and the ability to grow our own talent from K-12 on up. Two insurance companies, both facing problems on the IT side. One of them moved the entire operation to Bangalore. The other imported chief scientists from India. And that was a very bold move because, you know, you're not just taking the chief scientists and moving them to India, you're taking the entire stream of jobs and moving them. And so if you look at who is in our graduate schools, 2/3 of our graduate students in the STEM disciplines are foreign students. We have the best graduate universities in the world. But our education system is highly stratified. And if you just look at graduation rates, our Research One universities, they're in the 90%. But we desperately need a talent strategy that will pull all of our institutions up and give students opportunities to access high-demand jobs that will benefit our companies, the federal government in areas like national security, and the nation.
Thank you very much. I'm going to turn to my ranking member for the last question of the day.
Thank you. Just if I can make a comment on what you've just said here, that if we are not willing to make the investment, and I listened to Dr. Mr. Thompson here about early childhood education, K through 12. We should have universal early childhood education or universal preschool in the United States. K through 12, high school, colleges, in a way that allows us to be able to take from 0 to 3 through higher education. And if we view that is the way to succeed, that as a nation in terms of economic growth, then that's where our priorities ought to be. One of the things that I really am concerned about in the U.S. is that it used to be that education was just in the purview of the wealthiest, people who could afford to send their kids to school. I represent Wesleyan University, Yale University, places, that we have seen educate some of the brightest people in the world. We, as an institution of the Congress, and I always view that the Congress has what it's historically done great things. One of them is to allow the sons and daughters of working families, low-income families, to be able to get an education to succeed. My dad went to the 7th grade. My mother was a garment worker in the old sweatshops in New Haven, Connecticut. They put me through college, graduate school. There were loans and grants and so forth that allowed me to get an education, which allows me to sit here today. We have walked back from that mission, and I fear that we are looking at, once again, education for those families who can afford it. And our low-income kids, our middle-class families' kids, are unable to be able to take the opportunity without the grants, without Pell, without those inputs that you speak about. The teachers, which is a question that I want to get to, Dr. Mellow, you talked about teachers and making a difference. Teachers that you find to be most successful with at-risk kids, key characteristics. How do we prepare faculty to educate these kids? Less than a third of community college faculty are full-time. Adjunct faculty appointments on the rise. Given that part-time faculty spend less time on campus, what kinds of professional development should be available so we can help our kids who are at risk to be able to succeed?
And this is where technology is amazing. So what I'm doing now is working with 150 faculty from Florida, Arizona, and LaGuardia. 60% of them are adjunct faculty, and we're using technology to get people to focus on what are you doing right, what does it look like. We have a mechanism to really code what faculty are doing, so you can have some rigor in that, and then surround them with professional support so that you think of teaching as a profession in the same way you would a medical doctor who would do an operation in front of other people, and other physicians would help them get better. And so there are ways to take college teaching seriously, and I think technology is going to be our friend in this, but we must understand that now almost a third of the people working in the United States, from the last figures I saw, are entrepreneurs. They are doing it on their own, and I think we have to understand that we are living in a different economy, and in that we have to find supports that go to the people where they are. So conferences are great, it's lovely to have a mentor, but really using technology to make a difference in connecting with the faculty who are teaching today in our colleges is essential.
Mm-hmm. Community College Initiative, is that something that the President has offered? Not everybody got a chance to answer. Just what, good, bad, mediocre?
I think we have to raise this conversation about what does it take to prepare people for our world. And it's no longer high school. And we have to really understand that community colleges are an American invention. They're the most democratic system of higher education in the world. Nobody else is like us. And how to really use that to further the interests of the country, I think, are essential.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Just in conclusion, because I want to pick up on a point that my friend, the ranking member, made, and I agree with in terms of resource commitment here. There's also a role we didn't explore it here, but I've seen states cutting back a lot. If you look at the percentage of what they spend in their budgets and expecting us to fill in, and which stretches our resources, because I think what we really want to do or focus on students that frankly are the most disadvantaged or the most challenged, or just frankly just have not had the chance. And that's a very important role for us as a federal government, I think, to play. And it's a national mission. The second area, and this doesn't apply to any of you because frankly you work in the kind of institutions that do this automatically. automatically. But I watched my good friend, former Governor Mitch Daniels, this morning talking on Morning Joe about college education, and he made the point, at Purdue, they've actually frozen tuition 3 years in a row, but he said, we're a land-grant institution. Our original mission was to educate people that were not wealthy, that did not have opportunities, and maybe we had forgotten about that a little bit, and we need to move back toward understanding what our role is. It's different than maybe an elite private university, so those are things for all of us to think of, because I think to get to where all of us want to be, it's a collective effort. There's certainly a big federal component here, but there needs to be state and local support. In my state, actually, local communities do support community colleges with taxation, and they do support career tech. They literally tax themselves to have that opportunity available. And it's up to every state to choose how they want to do that. I can't hold us up as a model because we're not always spending as much money in other areas as I'd like. I've watched the higher ed portion of our budget shrink over about the last 20 years in terms of not dollars but percentages, and the amount of the cost of education we offload on a student is considerably higher today than it was when I was a state senator in the 1980s. It's just, we've made it tougher, not easier. We have a lot of programs, but if you actually looked at it in mass, it's tougher for our kids than it ought to be. With that, I want to thank each and every one of you, not just for taking your time to be here today, because it's really important to help our committee understand the problems and to create the public record so we can make some of the decisions that we need to make going forward. But much more importantly, just thank you for what you do each and every day to make sure that people have an access to the American dream, that they get that opportunity, and that we try and address some of the inequalities and divisions and inequities in our society and give people the opportunity. You've all given us not only terrific information and great suggestions, but frankly, the telling anecdote or the personal experience that quite often drives it home. So I can see why you're all exceptional educators and very successful in your field. So it's been a great hearing and appreciate it very much. I want to thank the ranking member for being here as well. Mr. Harris, thank you. And with that, we're adjourned.